Hi, my name is Rakos and I welcome you to another episode by Peaky Boardgamer. For today I have a great game to show you that I have recently played, The Word for Beyond the Sun, designed by Dennis Chan. The game is for 2 to 4 players and takes about 2 hours to finish. About the theme, humanity must abandon Earth, so players will be trying to find new home among the stars. Let's see a short overview and then we continue with the rules of the game. The consequences of the first thermonuclear war is forcing humanity to abandon Earth. Players take the role of factions competing against each other to be the leading faction in economic development, science and galactic influence. In the game, players focus their strategy in 2 main areas. One is technological progress. Advancing in technology not only awards players with victory points, but will also unlock more powerful and efficient action options. The second one is exploration of the deep space, controlling and colonizing systems. This as well will grant players with victory points, but will also support the resource production engine. Players must focus their production engine towards gaining the resources required to operate in these 2 areas. Players will also score victory points by completing achievements. After certain achievements are accomplished, the game comes to an end, and the faction with the most victory points will be the winning faction in Beyond the Sun. You begin by placing the technology board in the middle of the table. On the left side of the board there are 4 pre-printed guild areas. Cover each one of these guild areas with their corresponding guild tile. Players start the game only possessing the basic spacefaring technology. The pre-printed area is only applicable for a 4 players game. If you play with less players, you need to place the appropriate base spacefaring tile covering this area. I will set up the game for a 3 players game. Find the 4 level 1 technology cards and randomly distribute them into the 4 technology level 1 spaces on the board. Separate the rest of technology cards according to their level and place them facing downwards above their corresponding columns on the board. Then shuffle every pile. Then separate the event cards according to their level, level 2 and level 3. From level 2 event cards, find and separate the 2 ones I show you here, which are the only cards having a light blue border color. These events will always be included in your games. Shuffle the rest of event cards and randomly draw 4 of them, which will also be included along with these 2 event cards. The rest level 2 event cards return to the box. Shuffle your 6 level 2 event cards and place them onto the level 2 technology spaces on the board. Then repeat the process for level 3 event cards. Separate the 2 cards that have a light blue border, then add another 4 random cards from the pile and remove the rest cards from the game. Then shuffle the 6 level 3 event cards and cover the 6 level 3 technology spaces on the board. Then place the exploration board right next to the technology board. This is a double-sided board. Make sure you use the side applicable to your player count as indicated with this illustration. Next, take the system cards and separate them according to their letter A or B. System A cards only have 4 starting cards. Find and separate the 4 star cards. You can easily distinguish them by the start word in their top. After you shuffle them, randomly fill all A system spaces on the exploration board. Remaining start cards will be added to the rest System A cards. Now it's time to shuffle System A and System B cards in separate piles and keep them next to the exploration board as a supply. Finally, fill all B system spaces on the exploration board using cards from the B system card pile. Then separate the achievement cards according to their letter on their back side. There are 2 cards without a letter and these are always included in your game. After you shuffle A and B piles, you include in your game 1 card from the A pile and another one from the B pile. The rest of the achievement cards are not used and returned in the box. Place the 4 achievement cards next to the board facing upwards. Achievement spaces depicting this symbol are only applicable in a 4-player game. If not your case, then cover them using any type of component. Create a supply of ore next to the board. Now players will have to choose their factions. There are 4 factions in the game, and every faction has 2 boards, a basic one and an advanced one. Players decide in advance whether the game will have basic faction boards or advanced faction boards. You cannot mix them. In this video, I will be using the advanced faction boards. Important: if in a 2-players game, players cannot use the Disciples of the Cosmic Tabernacle faction. After players select one of the factions, they also take a set of components. Players use their food production discs to cover the 8 slots in their population growth track on their boards. Players use their ore production discs to cover the 8 circular slots in their ore production track. Players then take their dice using the supply side to fill all slots in the supply columns of their faction mat. After doing so, they should be left with 3 more dice. Players place 2 of these dice onto their board on their population side, indicating that they start with 2 available population. Players place their last cube on the sole space of the exploration board, using the side depicting a level 1 spacecraft. Players leave their action pawn and achievement discs next to their faction mat. At this point, randomly determine a first player who takes that token. The rest of the player turn order is determined clockwise. According to this order, the first and the second player start the game with 1 ore. If there is also a third and/or a fourth player in the game, then the third and the fourth players start the game with 2 ore. If you are playing the game using the basic mats, then you should take into account any additional setup rules stated in this area on your mat. If, however, you're using the advanced mat, then you should read and understand the 2 abilities you have written in this area as well. We will talk about them later on. The game is now ready to start. If you're still watching this video and like this kind of content, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't done already and hit that bell button so you get notified of all our future videos. I would be deeply grateful if you did, as this is the only way for this channel to grow. Starting with the first player and continuing clockwise, players alternate turns until the end of the game is triggered. The first player token never changes hands. On their turn, players do 3 things. First, they use their pawn to select an available action and then they perform it. Then players produce goods, and finally they check if they have satisfied any of the achievements. Then it's the next player's turn. Now let's see these 3 phases of a player's turn in greater detail. In their action phase, players must select any empty action hex and place their pawn there. Players can select any such hex on the left side of the board or on any technology cards that they have already researched, and this is indicated from a player's cube right next to the technology. We will see how players research technologies later on. On their first turn, players only know of basic spacefaring, so they will have to place their pawn in one of these hexes and then perform the action illustrated to the right side of these action spaces. You must note that if a player chooses an action space with this illustration, they must pay 1 ore to the supply as an additional cost. On their following turns, players must always move their pawn to a different action hex. This means that the player can reselect the same action if that action has another unoccupied hex. The illustration you see in the last action means that this action has unlimited number of hexes, so it can always be selected or reselected by a player. I will explain these actions later on, but you should know from now that actions might involve costs or optional parts. The cost of the action must always be paid. If the player cannot or does not wish to pay the cost, they must choose a different action. In the production phase, the player can choose one of 3 options. Either perform population growth in order to gain more population cubes available, or perform ore production in order to gain more ore pieces, or perform resource trade. Population growth works in liaison with this track and depends on how many food discs have been removed from the track. How they are removed will be explained later. In this hypothetical situation, let's say that the player selects population growth in their production phase. What is important for this production are these revealed illustrations. Going from left to right, the first illustration says that the player can take a cube from column A and make it an available population. The second illustration requires the player to take the supply cube from column B. If, however, the column is empty, like in our case here, this production is lost. From the third illustration, the player gains one more available population, and this concludes the player's production phase. Ore production works in liaison with this track. The player gains one ore piece for every such revealed illustration, so in this case the player would take 2 ore pieces. Resource trade provides 3 different options for the player to convert their own resources, so you do not trade with other players. The player can use any number of these options any number of times. The first option requires the player to spend 3 ore in order to take 1 supply cube from the columns and make it an available population. This has nothing to do with the population growth track. When this happens, you always take the supply cube from the leftmost non-empty column and make it an available population. With the second option, the player spends 1 ore and then takes any aircraft die deployed on the exploration board that can be of any level and then switch it to an available population. The third option, the player sacrifices one of their available population in order to gain 1 ore. When a population is sacrificed, the die is turned into a supply cube and is placed in the rightmost empty space. So in this case, it would be in column C. As a last phase in the player's turn, players check if they have accomplished any of the objectives described on the achievement cards. These are self-explanatory and I will not explain each one of them. However, these 2 achievement cards are always included in your games, and they lead you towards the 2 main strategies of the game: to research your first 4th level technology or to colonize at least 4 systems. If you have satisfied any of these objectives at the end of your turn, you must use one of your achievement discs, placing it in the leftmost empty space of that achievement card. You can only place 1 achievement disc on 1 turn. So if you have satisfied more than 1 achievement, you have to wait until your next turn in order to place another achievement disc. Now that we understand what the player does during their turn, we can focus on explaining some of the actions. Most of the technology cards that will appear in the game will offer action spaces of many sorts that of course cannot all be explained in this video. However, these are all self-explanatory once you understand some of the basic ones. So by explaining the basic actions, the main concepts of the game will also be explained, like how you research a new technology or how you operate in the exploration board, and to take this further, how you control areas or colonize systems. The technology board consists of 4 level 1 technologies which are discovered and many more that are not yet discovered. Level 1 technologies are discovered, yes, we can see what they can do, but a player can only use these technologies after they have researched them by placing one of their population there. So let's see the top 2 basic spacefaring actions. The first one enables the player to research a first level technology and the second one to research a level 2 technology. To research a technology, you must be eligible to do so. This means that if, for example, you want to research this technology, you must first research a previous technology which is linked to the one you want with this line. So, are you eligible to research any level 1 technology? Absolutely, because all level 1 technologies are linked to basic spacefaring which all players possess. So, by performing the top action, the player uses one of their available population to research one level 1 technology that is not already researched by that player. Of course, if you do not have the available population, you cannot perform the action. Any player that researches a new technology immediately effectuates all bonuses depicted with the immediate word. So now the orange player gains 1 ore and automates 1 ore production disk. When you automate a food or ore production disk, you take the leftmost disk and place it to the leftmost empty space of the automation track. By doing so, you increase your production capabilities, but also filling the automation track will worth victory points at the end of the game. If when you automate there is no disk left of the required type, then you use one of your achievement disks to place on the automation track. Also, if you have filled all the automation track, you can continue placing disks right next to it. Let's see the second action. With this action, the player spends 2 ore pieces in order to research one level 2 technology. In our example, the orange player can only research this level 2 technology as it is linked to a previous level technology already researched by that player. But why not this one? Because it is linked to 2 previous level technologies, and in order to be researched, the player must previously have researched both of the linked technologies. And it's not the case here. This time we have a research of an undiscovered technology. Researching an undiscovered technology involves a few more steps. First, if there is an event card, you reveal it and perform everything described on the card. First, the player turns one of their supply cubes into a new available population. This is one of the 2 start event cards which is always included in your games. This one enables the player to unlock a locked Tier 1 guild. Guilds contain action spaces that cannot be used until unlocked by such event cards. So now the orange player can select one of these 2 Tier 1 guilds and unlock it by removing the tile. Now we have a new action that enables players to research 3rd level technologies. After resolving the event card, the card is discarded. Now you must place a new eligible technology in that space. Every technology belongs to one color type. There are 4 colors: blue, red, and there is also yellow and green. The technology card that will be placed in that spot must be associated to at least one of the colors of all its linked previous level technologies. So, in this case, it must be associated to blue. If we were discovering this technology spot, then it could be associated to either blue or red. So the way to do this is the following. You take the corresponding technology deck and you start revealing cards until you find 2 that are eligible to be placed. So I revealed the first one. You check the incoming arrows to the left side of the card. Does it depict blue? Yes, it does. So this one is one of the 2 cards. You continue with the next card. Is that one eligible? No, it does not include blue on the left. You continue with the next one. Does it include blue? Yes, it does. So now I have the 2 eligible cards. The player takes these 2 cards, reads them, and selects which one to place in the technology space and which one to discard. The one that is not chosen, along as the not eligible ones that were drawn, will be placed in the bottom of the stack in any order the player decides. Do not shuffle the deck. So the player places the chosen technology card on that space, performs immediate effects if there are any, and the action is over. Finally, you should know that if you see such illustration with an eye in the top right corner, it means that the player must research an already discovered level 2 technology, and not discover a new one. Now let's see actions that enable players to interact with the exploration board. The exploration board contains areas with cards. These cards are systems that can be controlled and then colonized. Then we have 3 shipyard areas that can also be controlled but not colonized. Finally, we have soul and deep space areas which cannot be controlled. Players navigate the board with their spacecraft, moving to adjacent areas using these lines. Let's change the board to a more advanced situation and explain the next action. With this action, the player at first may optionally turn one of their population into a level 1 spacecraft and add it to the board. When a new spacecraft is added, it is either placed on Sol or in one shipyard area which is controlled by that player. An area is controlled by the player who has the highest strength by adding the level of all that player's spacecraft in the area. This is indicated by one of the player's discs, as you can see on the board. Control of an area is lost if any opponent has more power in that area than the player who currently controls it. So in this example, the orange player can place the new spacecraft in one of these three areas. Then the player may jump too. This means that the player can move two of their spacecraft once into adjacent areas or one of their spacecraft twice. Let's say that the orange player moves their level 3 spacecraft here and this level 1 spacecraft into this area. Players are not required to perform all of the jumps. They can move less. After the player finishes with jumping, the whole board must be re-evaluated for changes in control. By moving this spacecraft here, the player now controls this area. To indicate this, the player will now use one of their production discs, one that is also depicted in that area. In this example, the player has the option to use any one of the two types. Let's say the player uses a food production disc. After placing the disc, it cannot be changed. However, by moving this spacecraft out of this shipyard system, the player will lose control here. This is because another opponent has now more power in the area than the player who controlled it. If that spacecraft was absent, the orange player would keep control of that area. However, the orange player must now remove this disc and place it back to their personal board to the next empty space going towards the left. Now the white player controls this area and will indicate it by placing a food production disc here. The player gained control of the area even out of their turn. By moving the level 3 spacecraft here, the orange player has now more power than the blue player and takes control of that system. In addition to that, this system depicts a controlling effect. This is a bonus you take immediately when you take control of the area. In this case, the orange player will also gain 1 ore. The next action enables players to colonize an eligible system. The action says that the player must spend 4 ore pieces and also sacrifice one available population as a cost to colonize. To be able to perform this action, there must be a system card on the board where the player controls but also has the indicated minimum total spacecraft power. The orange player controls this system and has at least 4 power. After finding an eligible system, the player must then sacrifice aircraft of at least the indicated total power. In this situation, the player will probably sacrifice these 2 level 2 spacecraft. The player may also overspend and sacrifice more spacecraft than needed. These will go back as supply cubes, closing spaces from right towards the left as we already explained. The player then takes the card with the disc and leaves all other spacecraft in the area. The card is placed next to the player's play area. Then all remaining spacecraft in the area are forwarded to deep space and the empty space is filled with a new card from the supply. Then the player adds an additional production disc onto the newly colonized system. Since this system provides both options, the player may either place an ore production disc or a second food disc instead. After colonizing a system, the player reads the effect described in the bottom right corner of the card. This is either a one-time effect or an ability that the player may use until the end of the game. This one says, from now on, you may pay an extra ore to take an action that is occupied. And here in the bottom left corner of the card, we see victory points that will be awarded to that player at the end of the game. Finally, actions or effects like that one enable players to upgrade their ships. This one says that you may upgrade one of your ships by 1 level. You choose any spacecraft already on the board and you increase its level by 1. Of course, upgrading may cause an immediate change in control. The end of the game is triggered when 4 achievement discs are added in achievement cards. Remember that in a 2 or a 3 players game, only 3 discs are required. After you trigger the end of the game, the round continues until all players have had equal number of turns, and then a final round is performed with all players taking a final turn. Of course, during these final turns, more discs might be added by players. When the game ends, players proceed with scoring. Players gain a lot of victory points from research technologies as indicated next to the technology space. Victory points awarded for 4th level technologies is indicated on the text of the card. Players may also gain points from acquired event cards. Then players gain all victory points reached in their automation track. If a player has completed the track, then the player gains 1 more victory points for each additional disc. Next, players gain victory points from their colonized systems. For the exploration board, players gain 1 victory point for every controlled area. Non-controllable areas will award the player with the most power with 1 victory point. If a tie exists, all tied players will gain that point. Finally, players gain points from their placed achievement discs. The player with the most victory points is the winner of the game. In case of a tie, the first tiebreaker is the player with the least remaining food and/or production discs. The second tiebreaker is the player with the most remaining available population. And the third tiebreaker, the player with the most ore. If a tie still exists, then all tied players share their victory. When you play the game using the advanced faction boards, each faction will have 2 special powers. I will not explain these powers in this video. The text next to these boxes fully explains what these powers are about. These powers are initially locked. How you unlock them is also written in these boxes. For example, for this faction, Power A will be unlocked the first time the player empties supply columns A and B. As you can see, there is another illustration here to remind you of this. Power B will be unlocked the first time the player empties columns A, B, C and D. At the beginning of the game, make sure you understand your faction's powers and use them to your advantage. And that were the rules of Beyond the Sun designed by Dennis Chan. If you like our videos and want to see more, please subscribe to my channel. Until next time, have fun and play more board games.